So that being said, let's just jump right in, Scott. A lot of different mock drafts have come out for the NFL, for the Bengals, that sort of thing. We are not necessarily draft gurus, but we know enough to, be dangerous, I suppose. So let's kind of talk about. Let's start with, now that we're a week away, let's talk about some of the positions we think are narrowed down in those first couple of rounds that the Bengals will target. Why? And then maybe let's do a little 3-round mock draft for the Bengals that we think, based on the players that have been connected to them. Sound good?
Yeah. Oh, if I disappear, it's not that Ohio blew up or anything, but I think I'm on the far end of my Wi-Fi connection. So if I vanish, I shall return.
Well, you did briefly, but hopefully you heard what I said. We're gonna preview the draft and do a mock draft. Yep. So your thoughts on positions to the Bengals, first of all, and then we'll get to your mock draft selections.
I think, without a doubt, all indications seem to be some sort of edge rusher somewhere along the lines. I know a lot of folks, it's very, very mixed. I mean, obviously, people would like to have them target one in the first round if you could, because that way you kind of get your pick of the litter. The problem is it's so deep that you have to ask, well, is the value really there? Is someone, other than the kid from Texas A&M, are they really worth that pick? And if they don't take a guy number 9 overall, I assume somewhere in there they are going to take an edge rusher. They seem to have brought a lot of them in to Cincinnati. And even though we don't know which one they're going to draft, and they may not even draft a guy they brought in, I think at the end of the day they have shown enough interest that they are going to draft somebody probably in the first few rounds. And I think the fact that they traded for the kid from Jacksonville kind of says that, yes, we recognize we do need help in that position. At the absolute worst, we're going to have him. At the best, we're going to have, who knows, be it a Taco Charlton, Tim Williams, Derek Barnett, somebody. So I think that's probably the first thing. It's very interesting, the running backs they've brought in, because you look at Jeremy Hill being kind of has that 1 year left. You don't know what you have with Bernard. They seem kind of surprised that Burkhead left, which you surprised because they weren't really going to pay him a whole lot. So I think they're, as much as you can play your hand without really playing your hand, I think that they're showing that. So, I mean, in theory, you could pick pretty much one guy from every position. But I think we can probably be safe to say that in those first few rounds, you're probably getting a running back, probably getting an edge rusher, probably not getting an offensive lineman, despite what the fans may want.
Yeah.
So if you agree, am I crazy?
No, I think there's a handful of positions that are in play. Unfortunately, one could argue that this year is a big year for the Bengals needing offensive line help, even though they used 2 top picks a couple of years ago on tackles who are pegged to be their starting left and right tackles this year. They've struggled since when they've been on the field, but be that as it may, they're going to start. And you lose Zeitler, you lose Whitworth, and you kind of say, okay, well, they need offensive line help. Unfortunately, this class is not the strongest class for offensive linemen, and especially tackle. You could say, Cam Robinson, that could be a top 10 guy, and he's maybe the top guy in the draft, but there's a lot of questions there. So I agree with you. I don't know if offensive line is in play high. I think they might go interior linemen more in the middle rounds, maybe a swing guard center, swing guard tackle. I agree with you, though. I think if you look at the top positions that should be not only available, but that they want to target are probably going to be wide receiver, linebacker, edge rusher, tight end, and running back. I think those are maybe the 5 guys within those 5 positions in the first 3 rounds that the team is looking at. And as you look at the mock drafts, whether it's from Joe Goodberry, Mel Kiper, the writers at Cincy Jungle, we've put together mocks that that there's a lot of common names that seem to be linked to the Bengals at those positions, and it depends on the round and how people see that they fit. Everybody seems to have their taste in certain players. There are guys that there are a lot of people that think that a lot of players from 9 to about 20 overall are kind of the same type of talent. And then there are those who kind of say that there's some very polarizing players in this draft, be it on-field talent, off-field problems, that sort of thing. So do you agree with the sentiment that the Bengals, if they were at 9 or if they were at 15 or 16, they might be getting similar value regardless?
I would have to totally agree, which I think is one of the most frustrating things about this draft is that the level of the blue chip players seems to drop pretty quickly once you get to about the 5th or 6th pick. And the problem is the next tier, or the guys who are like the upper tier, absolute need for the Bengals. So I think that's kind of one of the frustrating things is that most other years, being number 9, you'd feel pretty confident, hey, we're going to get a pretty good guy. But if you look at this year, it's just like, yeah, I mean, you'd prefer to trade down. The problem is there's no to trade up, because that usually means a quarterback or some sort of elite player that you can't get later, and that just doesn't seem to be the case. So they're kind of stuck in a position where probably no one's going to want to trade up with them. And the last time they had number 9, when they drafted Keith Rivers, no one wanted to trade up to that 9 spot. So you're left making a pick, and the guy they could have got that year at 9 was comparable to what they could have gotten at 15 or 20. You kind of see that this year. I mean, some of the guys we've talked about at 9, guys like Reuben Foster or Mike Williams or Corey Davis, are guys that you see in some mocks drop to 15 or lower, either because of injury concerns or other guys moving ahead of them. So yeah, it's one of those things where there's a grouping of 10, 20 guys who are all kind of the same. You get your pick of them, but at that point you'd prefer to get the best value, and the best value is just kind of moving to the bottom of that and just getting whichever one's left over, because it means you're getting additional picks or something. And yeah, it's just unfortunate unless someone falls unexpectedly, kind of like Laramie Tinsel did last year. So if we get something crazy like that, let's say Garrett has a picture of him, with drugs or something right as the draft starts, that would be a good chance to be at number 9. But barring anything crazy like that, it's going to be a great year to have that 9 pick.
Yeah, note to the rookie prospects: no Instagram pics of you wearing a gas mask this year, please. That'll hurt you. Like you said, we'll be talking about running back in just a little bit here. Like offensive line, quarterback is kind of a weak class this year as well. And that is kind of a bummer for the Bengals at 9, because usually those teams maybe in the low teens, middle of the first round would want to leapfrog and get up there and want to, give out some higher picks. And that could benefit the Bengals if they, if they're wanting to move back and even collect more picks. That might not be the case. This will go into our mock draft now. This one's tough to figure out because, you mentioned Laramie Tunsil last year. A guy like that who could be falling, that was once pegged to the Bengals at number 9 is Reuben Foster, a guy who had shoulder surgery. Then he had a weird blow up at the combine and was sent home. And now there's reports that his shoulder hasn't currently healed. And there's not really a true timetable as to when that's going to come, when he's going to come around from that. Probably should still be able to play as a rookie, I would think. But that's going to hurt his stock, and it's going to be interesting to see if he falls out of the top 10, even out of the first round. There's some rumors of that happening. So that being said, Scott, I mean, let's kind of do a rough 3-round mock draft based on the positions we see. Last year, I got to pat myself on the back a little bit. When I did a mock draft for Cincy Jungle, I did select William Jackson and Tyler Boyd for the Bengals, but I did that in rounds 2 and 3, not round 1, 1 and 2, I should say. So I was a little accurate last year, just a round off on those guys. I doubt I'll be as accurate this year, but think the Bengals in terms of player and position. What do you see them doing in the first 3 rounds this year?
I'd say if I were to, put on my guessing hat is probably the best way to say it. With all the names they've thrown out, since they tend to be a very big value team, I just can't see them drafting any of the defensive ends that high. I don't think they're going to go after Barnett. I don't think they'll go after Charlton or McKinley or anyone. So I'm going to eliminate them. And I thought there was a very interesting interview with Duke Tobin's dad on Bengals.com, which I think was also aired on the radio. And he said one very interesting thing that I took away from that I think has stuck with his son is the idea that they draft people from winning programs. A lot of the teams they draft kids from, whatever level it is, they have a lot of success. So to me, I think that means that someone like Barnett wouldn't be at number 9 because Tennessee hasn't been a big winning program. For whatever reason, they tend to prefer guys, the idea being, well, if your team was good, you were good. The edge rushers off the table. I also don't think they're going with Foster, despite their love of the Alabama program. I think they've probably enough by going after guys from big programs who are surrounded by talent, where you're not really seeing that guy's talent, and plus with the injury concerns. Although you could redshirt him, I just don't see them going that direction. I don't think they value linebacker that high. Most of the linebackers tend to be undrafted free agents or later guys. Maybe one exception, or I guess the 2 exceptions being Rivers and Maluka. Neither of them was really that great. They had better production from guys like the Honey Jones, Vincent Gray, so on and so on. So that being said, I think that leaves them, as far as the best value, one of the 2 wide receivers, either Davis from Western Michigan or Mike Williams from Clemson. And we can go 2 weeks ago, I just said Mike Williams hands down. Since then, I've watched a lot more video of Davis, and the more I watch him, the more I'm impressed with him. He has strong hands. He catches the ball with his hands. He gets great separation, which is one thing Williams doesn't do as well. Williams just basically overpowers people and gets all the jump balls because he has an insane jump radius and can beat you one-on-one when the ball is right there. So I think when it's all said and done, I'm just going to say, because he's a guy I have really become more interested in as a prospect, is Davis, the wide receiver, round 1. And I know they just drafted Boyd last year. They just drafted Brandon LaFell, but I think based on the value, based on who falls to them, I'm going to say Davis, the wide receiver, in the first round. The second round, I'd love to say Joe Mixon. I'm a huge fan of this podcast. I'm a huge fan of him. I don't think he's going to be there at their second round pick. So I think they missed out on him, so I'm thinking at the second round pick, they're probably going to draft. As much as I'd love to go a different position, I'm going to say someone like Dalvin Cook fall. It's going to be someone like that someone who shouldn't fall, but you just, for whatever reason, didn't expect him to be there and he falls to them. So I'm going to say either someone like him or Kamara, someone who can possibly play all 3 downs, but can catch and run. So I would say Chris Davis first round, Dalvin Cook second, not Chris. Sorry, whatever his name is. Davis
Corey
first
Davis.
round. Corey Davis. Second round, I'm going to say either Kamara or Dalvin Cook, and then third round, I'm not sure whoever. Since it's such a deep class, I'm going to say one of those guys that falls to him, either probably one of those small school kids, like either the kid from Youngstown State or the kid from Ohio, Basham or someone like that. Someone who a lot of fans like, oh yeah, I've heard of him. So that's my 3. I'd be very interested next week to see that I get all 3 wrong, but as of right now, I'll just say Davis, Cook, and then one of the depth of edge rusher players if I were to pick 3 right now.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, obviously that's kind of part of the process is this is kind of a crapshoot, and really only the Bengals front office truly knows how their board is falling and who they have at those spots. I'm gonna give you some names, and then I think there's a couple of dark horse possibilities as well. I look at pick number 9, and I have a post coming up on Cincy Jungle. I mean, I get the needs on defense, edge rusher and linebacker being the biggest. I see a lot of edge rush talent that a team could get, in the later of the first, top of the second, and even into the third round. Some of those guys are a little bit more project guys, but there's a lot of talent there. And some of the guys who may fall to them, a Solomon Thomas, a Jonathan Allen, that sort of thing. While I love the versatility of those guys, I don't know that they really truly fit the Bengals defensive scheme as a guy that, I think the size matches up, but something tells me that those might be a little bit more 3-4 type of defense guys. But it would be interesting to see if some of those guys who are projected in that top 5, if they end up making it to number 9 that are defensive linemen, if the Bengals spring for one. I think what I was saying about the post is I think that the Bengals should be looking at a little more offense this year. And I think you look at the end of the tail end of last year's schedule and how things played out, how the scores played out, that sort of thing. And you say, okay, obviously this team needs something where they can score some points and score more points. I mean, at the end of the year, it was almost with regularity that they were in the teens in terms of points scored. So I think I'm going to agree with you on the Corey Davis pick. Personally, I think I like Mike Williams a little more, but I do get the upside with Corey Davis. It worries me that he has not, officially run or did much of a workout either at the combine or a pro day. But I do think that is a guy that they will probably look very hard at. One dark horse guy that I've kind of started looking at for the first time, and this goes against, and you're right about the interview with the big school guys, the successful school guys. They like guys who come from winning programs and they bring that winning attitude and winning culture to the Bengals, and it makes sense. But one kind of, I don't want to say he's a smaller school guy, but it's definitely not known as a football powerhouse, is Temple's Hassan Reddick, and he's a guy who has been rising up draft boards rapidly. He can rush off the edge. At Temple, he also played a little bit outside linebacker, range kind of player. Could be a guy that the Bengals look at number 9. It's a little bit of a reach there, I think, but he's pegged to kind of go maybe mid-first. But he kind of maybe kills 2 birds with 1 stone, if you will, if he can show that he can play outside linebacker and put his hand in the dirt to rush the passer. The Bengals haven't had success in drafting those types of players and making them into quality pros over the years, but I think he's the most talented of those players that they've tried that with. So he could be a dark horse pick at number 9 for me. I think it's a little high personally, but like I said, I think he can maybe 2 needs for you on defense, given his skill set if he ends up working out. Like I said, I think Corey Davis is probably that pick at number 9. I agree with you on Joe Mixon at number at the top of the second round. I know you went with Cook, but I think they're going to do what they can, whether it's at the top of the second, move back into the first, whatever it may be. I think they want him. They've shown a ton of interest in him, and even with all the off-field stuff, I think they like him. There is a report that came out today about some more issues that have sprung up about a high school issue where he supposedly beat up another young woman in high school. That could cause him to tumble a bit more, maybe stick in that second round. We'll see. But I still think he's going to go relatively high, even though some teams have supposedly taken him off their draft boards. So I'll say Davis, Mixon. And then I think at that point you look at defensive line and kind of what's left there. I wonder if a guy like a Terrell Basham of Ohio is going to be there in the top of the third. Maybe not. He might be one of those guys that, in the second round, middle of the second round, high second round, a team says, let's take a chance on this guy. But he's a small school guy. He's got a good skill set. Needs some polishing, but does seem to have a pretty good motor and skill set. Might be a little bit of a pipe dream in terms of him being there in the top of the third, but I think that him or a player like him will be there, and that's the route they take after going offense in the first 2 rounds. I will say this: if the Bengals don't maybe go Reddick in the first round and they don't go wide receiver early in the third round, I think that's when they do go wide receiver. They've drafted a number of players in the third round under Marvin Lewis at that position: Mohamed Sanu, Chris Henry, and a lot of those guys have ended up being pretty productive for them. And at that point, at the top of the third, the guys you'd probably be looking at, if they didn't go wide receiver early on, are probably Texas A&M's Josh Reynolds, USC's Juju Smith-Schuster, maybe D.D. Westbrook from Oklahoma. He probably won't be there though. And there's a
He was
couple
the
of other
guy
names.
I've heard recently. I guess his interviews have been horrible as far as DD. If he was
okay. I had admittedly not heard that. So that and you know that's the thing with this draft in particular. It seems like a lot of people, and it happens this time of year anyways. The past couple of weeks, there's a lot of rumors, a lot of mudslinging, and a lot of things. Unfortunately for these young kids, that stuff gets brought up from their past that may or may not have even happened, and or happened a long time ago, and they're trying to get past it, and they get dinged for it. But inevitably, there's always someone that, you know, we as fans, the mock drafters, all of these people, they sit here and they say, you know, these are guys that could be, that should be first round, second round guys, and all of a sudden they fall to the third round. We saw it last year with Andrew Billings, prime example, a guy that was pegged as a late first round pick, and the Bengals got him in the fourth round. So it's not totally common, but it happens. And so those are our picks. Again, recap, 3-round Bengals mock for Scott was Corey Davis, Dalvin Cook, and who was your third pick, Scott?
It was a very ambiguous best of the left, or best of the rest of the edge rushers, be it someone like Walker from Florida State, Basham from Ohio, whoever the best one is, it's still there. Gotcha.
So you and I are kind of on the same wavelength here. I went with Corey Davis with the possibility of Hassan Reddick being a dark horse guy. Joe Mixon, I think, is that second round guy, and then a guy like Terrell Basham in the third as well. If they kind of go Reddick in the first round, then I see a wide receiver like Reynolds, Smith-Schuster, maybe Westbrook, guys like that could be there in the top of the third that they could grab. I want to welcome in Connor Howe, and your timing, even though you've joined us late the past couple of weeks, buddy, your timing has been impeccable because we are just finishing up our Bengals 3-round mock draft. And just so you know, Connor, we made an announcement at the beginning of the show. We're going to try and do a live draft show next Thursday night. We're not going to do the Wednesday night show. We're going to try and do a Thursday night show around the time that we normally come on, and kind of go through that top 10 and obviously talk about the number 9 pick when the Bengals go there. Obviously, if they trade back, trade up, that's going to be something to discuss as well. But just so you know, buddy, you can pencil that in your calendar. Quickly, Connor, if you can.
Yeah,
well,
I got
quickly.
One already.
Not quickly, but first of all, before you get to your mock, talk about the positions the grouping of positions you see the Bengals taking within those first few rounds and why, and then talk about your Bengals 3-round mock that you have for the team this year.
Okay, well, I think that what Paul Guenther said earlier this offseason at some point about how the team is going to probably or I don't know if he made a specific statement directly talking about it, but he basically insinuated that the Bengals were going to take multiple defensive ends within the first few rounds. So I would guess they're going to take multiple defensive ends within the first 4 rounds. That's the biggest takeaway I have. I encourage everyone who's watching or who listens to go check out Andy Benoit on Twitter. He's one of my, I said that last week, he's one of my favorite draft people. Today he just he'll do this thing where he watches a team's film and then he'll just rally off a series of tweets about, you know, whatever's happening with that team in his opinion. And he again doubled down that he thinks the defensive end position is the biggest position of importance for the Bengals. He also said that he believes receiver, contrary to popular opinion with Bengals fans, which I also agree with, that I agree with his opinion, not the contrary or the popular belief, that receiver, while it's a popular position, might be more a position of importance in terms of depth rather than the Bengals needing a guy to help at the top. So I understand the Corey Davis pick, but I also think that I don't know. The way I take a risk on a guy like Corey Davis. So I'll say defensive end. I think like additional depth at certain positions, receiver, linebacker would be nice. Another tackle at some point will be nice, but like, is that top round talent? Probably not. Running back could probably go high. I don't know. I think it could also go low. But I think the only thing I really feel like I know is that the Bengals should, not will, take a defensive end at some point in the first 2 or 3 rounds. But as we've seen in years past, even when it's felt like defensive end is by far the biggest position you need, the Bengals completely take everyone by surprise, go elsewhere. They took Eifert in 2013 when no one thought that was going to happen. They took cornerbacks in 2014 and 2016. And so, yeah, with all that being said, my 3-round mock is it's actually I'm posting a 7-rounder on Cincy Jungle tomorrow. Spoiler alert, but
Spoiler alert, there you go.
yeah, it's kind of reward for all the fans who listen to the show. But round 1, I picked Malik McDowell, the defensive end out of Michigan State, which is probably going to be controversial. I took in round 2, which I don't know if the Bengals are going to take linebacker really high, but I think that if they do, they'll wait till the 2nd or 3rd round. They probably won't take Reuben Foster, and I picked Raekwon McMillan. Out of Ohio State. They visited him. I don't put a ton of stock into the pre-draft visits, but they talked to him twice, and he, I don't know, the whole Ray Maluga being a 2nd-rounder thing, whenever that happened, it seems like it just kind of makes sense for the Bengals. He's a guy that kind of fits what they're looking in the position, and that could help. And then round 3, it's kind of like you, or at least Scott, with the whole best of the rest thing, but I took another defensive end. I took Jordan Willis out of Kansas State. He just kind of doubling down on the whole Paul Guenther talking about defensive ends and also how they aren't necessarily holding to that standard of tall, long defensive ends, but also they could potentially work in a guy like Chris Smith, who they just traded for, or Jordan Willis, if they drafted him.
So you went defense first 3 picks, correct?
Yeah, which also doesn't really happen a lot, is worth mentioning. They went offense in the first 3, and I think it was the year they took Oboihi and Fisher. They also took, I think, Croft in round 3, or an offensive player. But aside from that, it's
Dawson maybe.
Yeah, aside from that, it's been 2 of one, then 1 of the other in like almost every single draft. So I don't know. I don't think it's going to be all defense, but I think it's just the way the board fell in this mock draft that I did. If I did one that was just me picking names from each round that I like, it'd be different.
Yeah. So you went Malik McDowell, Raekwon McMillan, and the 3rd pick again was
Jordan Willis.
Jordan. Okay. So you don't think then that the addition of Wallace Gilberry, the rare, semi-rare trade that
made for I don't think either one of those things really mean anything now.
Okay, fair enough. And like we said, that edge rusher is a need for the Bengals, and I think in some capacity, whether it's 3rd round or 1st round or what have you, all 3 of us have the Bengals taking some sort of an edge rushing talent in our mock drafts. A couple of comments in the chat room. There is Amun Kalikas wrote, they're not going to go linebacker with the Minter signing. They're not going to go wide receiver with the 2 draft picks. I'm assuming from last year, Tyler Boyd and Cody Core, and LaFell re-signing. They won't go edge because they're dumb. So OJ Howard will be the pick because Eifert won't re-sign. That's the prediction there. Waldo, a show regular, talking about Forrest Lamp, could play right guard or left tackle. He's obviously known as one of the best offensive linemen in this class. And there's a couple of other people who need to get Corey Davis. Waldo also asks, and this is a good segue into our next topic. But before we get to there, Waldo asked, does anybody like Curtis Samuel, the wide receiver running back out of Ohio State? Connor, your thoughts on him?
Me?
Yes.
Oh, I just don't really see it. I think we kind of talked about it last week. The Bengals it seems like they have their mold at receiver, which wouldn't be Samuel. And I don't know if he really wants to play running back or if the Bengals see him as a running back. There's a lot of guys in the draft, and I just don't think that him and the Bengals are going to line up. Okay.
See, personally, and I'll get to you in a sec, Scott. Personally, and you bleed scarlet and gray, right? So personally with Curtis Samuel, if Hugh Jackson was still the Bengals offensive coordinator, where he's creative. He was really an Andrew Hawkins guy. And there were ways that both he and Jay Gruden used Andrew Hawkins kind of out of the backfield with shovel passes and end arounds and things like that. They used him in little short routes, yards after the catch plays. That would be something I could see where Curtis Samuel makes sense. Unfortunately, at least from what we saw last year with Ken Zampese, the creativity isn't as high with him as it is with Hugh Jackson. So that's why I don't know if Curtis Samuel would be a pick for the Bengals. Maybe if Hugh Jackson was there and could bang the table a little bit for a guy that can bring some athleticism, some speed, and they can do some different things with him, I think maybe then he could be a pick. That's me personally. Like the guy, I am concerned about, where are you going to play him in the NFL? But, if he's talented enough and you got a creative offensive coordinator, I think you make room for him. What do you think, Scott?
Yeah, I think he's kind of one of those tweener players, but having seen a lot of Ohio State games, he was a huge chunk of their offense this year after losing Ezekiel Elliott, losing Mike Thomas, and their quarterback JT Barrett struggling to throw the ball. He was pretty much the only receiver they had the whole season. And other than their young power running back, he was pretty much the whole offense this year. I mean, he is a great receiver out of the backfield, probably up there with Christian McCaffrey as far as the top receivers from the backfield. He's not going to be a three-down back, but he started as a running back until they moved him to wide. I think he played mostly wide receiver just because they really didn't have an else to throw the ball to who could get separation. And he's very shifty, very elusive. He has amazing speed. I mean, I think whatever he had at his pro day or combine was insane as far as straight line speed. But it's not just straight line, 40-time speed. It's actual game speed. He is a great all-around player. It's just a matter of, can you utilize him correctly? Yeah. Can you give him, 5 or 10 carries a game? Can you find a way to get him, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 targets a game? And some of the things that Giovanni Bernard does, he's probably a faster, more elusive version of Bernard. But I don't know where he'll go. He'd probably go before they would take him. He's kind of like a Braxton Miller who went to Houston last year, but just a more polished, refined version. Miller was basically very elusive with the ball in his hands, but just didn't have a position. This guy has more of a position. So I'd see him as a kind of a better prospect than Miller last year, who went a little higher than he probably should have. So, yeah, I wouldn't complain if we had him. I just don't think it's, like Connor said, I don't think it's going to line up because I think someone's going to take him before the Bengals would.
Yeah. You have to create plays for him in the playbook. That's the bottom line. You have to make sure that you would create certain plays and, make sure that you get him a certain number of snaps, be it from the backfield or wide receiver. Good question from Waldo. Great comments in the YouTube chat. What do you guys think about our host 3-round Bengals mock drafts? Are we idiots? Are we geniuses? Are we somewhere in the middle? Let us know. You can get in touch with the show via email, theobinsider@gmail.com, on Twitter @BengalsOBI. You can also subscribe to all of our content on our SoundCloud channel. So be subscribed to that as well as our YouTube channel. We do this show live every episode on our YouTube channel, as well as at Cincy Jungle. You can catch all of our content there. And then we're also on iTunes as well. So download our stuff today and let us know your thoughts, your questions. We want to answer those, and obviously appreciate the interaction in the chat room that we get every week now. It's pretty awesome. Just a little side note, I did get an email, a comment from one of our listeners who actually appears to reside in Scotland. So this show is international, fellas. It's pretty cool that we have Bengals fans that tune into this show all around the world. And it's cool that the Bengals themselves have fans all around the world. So thanks to the listeners. Keep tuning in. We love having you join us. As I mentioned,